Welcome back to the Twin of the Moon guided meditation series. This is Coach Feeney. I'll be your guide for the evening. So, once again, when you're ready, take your seat and close your eyes and feel your body resting in space. Just feel the feeling of gravity. Feel the solidity or apparent solidity of your body against whatever you might be sitting on, a chair or a cushion. And then let the body resolve itself into a cloud of fleeting sensation, and allow your awareness to begin to focus on the breath in the midst of that cloud sensation. And take a moment to notice whatever mood you feel now. Are you restless, happy, depressed? Is there a feeling tone coloring your awareness in this moment? And while this practice is not generally about manipulating experience, it's simply noticing experience, and that begins to change experience on its own. I want you to notice that you can actually change your experience quite suddenly. For instance, you know what it's like to be happy. You know what it's like to smile and to have a smile in your mind. So in this moment, just put a smile in your mind. This may be a matter of suddenly engaging the muscles in your face, but just from the inside, in consciousness, smile. And see if that changes the way you feel in this moment. You actually know what it's like to be without a care in the world, to have nowhere to go, to have no regrets, to have nothing but attention happily placed in the present. See if you can suddenly, in a flash, access that state of mind and embrace this moment. You have the rest of your day, today and tomorrow, to be worried. You have the rest of your day to feel the urgency of all that you need to get done. And in this moment, completely surrender all of that. In the moment you notice you're lost in thought, notice the thought itself without judgment. Judgment is just another thought. And then return to the breath. See how quickly you can drop everything and come to rest in the present. It need not take time. Just feel the energy of your body, the heaviness, contact, again, with whatever you might be sitting on. Feel the next breath and relinquish everything you've been thinking about, worrying about, or planning just for this moment. See if you can feel the next breath precisely, but without making any kind of strained effort. Just notice how exactly it appears as it comes on its own. Notice if you're taking any posture in the mind with respect to the breath, leaning into it or waiting for it, anticipating it. And then just drop back and simply receive it. Be the space in which each sensation and sound simply appears. And if you feel that you're watching the breath from a place inside your head, if you're somehow above above it in the nostrils or far above it, if you're paying attention to your abdomen or chest, notice that place too. That sense of location is appearing in consciousness. That too is an object of sorts. It's appearing in the same place that the breath is and that sounds are. And simply rest as the space of consciousness in which all of these things are appearing. Is there really a sensory consciousness? Once again, notice how attention feels. Does it feel like it's inside your head? Does it feel like it's coming from a source? If it does, notice that feeling, the feeling of being inside a head, the feeling of being located, that too must be an appearance in consciousness. Otherwise, there would be no way to feel it. Consciousness already contains it, it's prior to it. Simply drop back into that prior state and notice whatever appears. For the last minute of this session, open your eyes and with a very wide gaze, simply stare into the space in front of you. And whatever you see, whether it's objects on a desk or a shelf of books or trees outside your window, whatever you see, simply let your visual field resolve into a pattern of color and shadow. Relinquish your concepts about the objects you see and gaze upon the raw data of visual perception. It might help to think that you are seeing everything in the mirror. The mirror has no depth. There's just light on the surface of the glass. See if you can notice that about your visual field. There's just light. Drop all effort. Don't try to be mindful. Don't try to pay attention to anything else other than this. Don't worry about whether you're lost in thought and notice whatever happens. Okay. Well, I introduced a new practice today. It's not so much of a practice, but a kind of insight, and it's the recognition that we only tend to feel the way we feel moment by moment, and it's possible to suddenly feel different. The shift can be subtle, but it can be quite revolutionary. The moment you notice that you're feeling cranky or bored or angry or in some way dissatisfied, it's possible to be mindful of that and to notice the half life to that emotion. And that is mostly the practice I recommend here. It's also possible to, in a flash, feel another way, to access a different attitude. And once you have some degree of mindfulness, it really is just a matter of deciding to do that. Remembering that you can do that, you can suddenly be content and you can suddenly be grateful to have this moment of life. You can suddenly remember that you love people. It doesn't take a lot of preamble or momentum to access these states. So as you go about your days and you feel the possibly the mediocrity of ordinary life begin to intrude, you might experiment with this. Just remember how much you love your children or your parents or the beauty of the natural world, or just put a smile in your mind, if only for a moment. And what does it all mean? The grand question of like, what is the meaning of life? What is our purpose here? These are, in my view, the great pseudo questions of like philosophy and religion. So we don't need to really ask them. We need not ask them. It's often imagined that in the absence of having answers to the questions of this kind, there's a massive void in our lives that must be filled by something. Myth, superstition, agonizing doubts. This is an illusion. It's an imaginary problem. It's a pure confection of thought. Let's find another starting point. We can start with the big picture. There's the cosmos, and complex life has emerged within it. Just imagine Earth without human beings, and you have the full miracle of evolution. You have DNA replicating itself, and you have consciousness as it exists in wolves and eagles and chimpanzees. What you don't have are all the existential doubts that lead people to wonder, what does it all mean? You have no temptation for teleological thinking, purpose-driven thinking. You wouldn't say a wolf is so important that the universe must have had a higher purpose in producing it, nor would its beauty be diminished once you acknowledged that there is no higher purpose that brought it into the world. And I would argue that the same would be true even if you would imagine having a world filled with modern human beings. Imagine the last generation of anatomically modern human beings, maybe 75,000 years ago, before the advent of complex language or complex material culture, before anyone could have a conversation of the sorts that we are now having, before anyone could articulate a concern for the future that brought into being these worries about what it all means or what is life's purpose. Imagine a world with those people. Where would the temptation to wonder about the meaning of it all or the purpose of it all come from? You standing outside that world wouldn't say, there must be a higher purpose to all of this here. The world is what it is. Everything is simply appearing based on prior causes. Now, a related issue here is that people will worry about meaning in the absence of free will. I should remind you of two things here. When I talk about free will, some people find it unpleasant to think of it as an illusion. If you're one of those people, you don't need to listen to this. But there's nothing intrinsically unpleasant about this. There's nothing that robs or needs to rob one's life of pleasure and meaning. If the movie of your life were rewound in your brain and your soul even, and the surrounding world were returned to precisely the states they were an hour ago, you would spend the ensuing hour exactly as you just have. There's simply no way for physical and mental causes or even spiritual causes to propagate that makes sense of this common notion of free will, and adding randomness to this clockwork doesn't help any. So there's this mystery at our backs. Everything is simply springing into view. Every intention and desire and choice simply emerges as does the impulse to follow or resist these intentions and desires and choices. You don't know what you will think until you think it, and there is no evidence at all that you could have thought otherwise a moment ago. Again, if your brain were in precisely the state it was in, you would think that last thought or form that last intention a trillion times in a row. Your experience of consciousness in this moment and of making choices is totally compatible with the absence of free will, with a truly deterministic universe, or a universe governed by determinism and some randomness thrown in. So each thought is like a wolf or an eagle or a person. It simply appears in the cosmos based on prior causes. Now, contrary to many people's expectations, recognizing the illusoriness of free will doesn't diminish the good things in life. There's still an impressive difference between happiness and suffering, and it remains perfectly rational to prefer happiness. You don't have to believe in free will or in some higher purpose in existence or some overarching plan to see the wisdom of removing your hand from a hot stove, or to prefer loving relationships with other people to hostile ones. The meaning of life isn't found by coming up with answers to badly posed questions, like what does it all mean? It comes from finding good enough reasons to be deeply immersed in the present moment and to create and discover new and interesting things and ideas, and to connect with the people around us. No one has ever found meaning by brooding over his past or future. And if you do become immersed in the present, you won't find any evidence for free will here, but neither will you find a reason to worry about its absence. Rather, what is there for you to notice is the intrinsic openness and freedom of consciousness in each moment. Everything is simply appearing, and you are in the condition in which these things appear. And it's important to appreciate the power of thought and concepts here. Our thoughts seem to be to determine the character of most experiences. We're all intimately familiar with four general states of consciousness. In the first, our bodies are comfortable, and yet our minds are making us miserable. In the second, our bodies might be quite uncomfortable. Perhaps we're engaged in a strenuous workout, but our minds are happy. In the third, our bodies are uncomfortable. Maybe we're in pain and we're also miserable. And in the fourth, we're enjoying some state of physical ease or pleasure, and this is attended by happy thoughts. So mind and body are separable here with respect to the valence of experience. Now, people that are living meaningful lives generally have a story to tell themselves and others that puts their pains and pleasures in a context that they feel good about. So the search for meaning comes when we're in states 1 or 3. That is, however our bodies feel, our minds are troubled, and we're trying to get to states 2 or 4. We're trying to get to a place where we feel good about what we are doing and experiencing, whatever the character of our sensory experience of that moment. And the difference between being wise or foolish lies in how we attempt to do that. And we have thousands of years of literature and collectively many billions of years of human experience that attest to the difference between good and bad decisions in that area. And to make these decisions well, it's important to find a positive relationship to uncertainty. And here there really is power in certain thoughts, and the conceptual frame we put around experience matters. How you think about uncertainty and risk matters. So on some level, it's useful to believe that whatever doesn't kill you can at least potentially make you stronger. This happens to be true. There's very often a silver lining in difficult experiences. So it's important to realize this in advance. It cuts down on worry and it allows us to take small risks that will very likely pay off. Even bad things offer an opportunity for growth. This is a belief that is worth having. This is an algorithm that produces resilience and changes your conception of failure. Failure is not always bad, and therefore it's not worth fearing in many cases. It's also important to realize that the things you want or are afraid to lose are rarely as important as you think they are. This is a very spread observation in behavioral economics. We're well known to be terrible at predicting how much good or bad things will affect us. The truth is, they don't affect us nearly as much as we hope or fear. Now, realizing this and finding ways to be happy in the present before things happen is in large measure what it means to be wise. Wisdom is understanding that you don't have to hold your happiness hostage until some future time where your desires are gratified. They get gratified. But that doesn't mean that it's irrational to plan for the future. Yes, none of us know how long we will live, but it's generally rational to assume that you'll have enough time to devote to long-term projects to build a family or a career. You don't need to live every day as if it was your last in order to be wise, but the trick here is to remain process-oriented. Whatever your goals, the quality of the journey has to become more important than those fleeting moments where you actually arrive at your destination, because most of your life is the journey. Most of your life is the process of solving problems. It is not and will never be a condition of basking in the absence of all problems. There will always be something to do. The frame of mind in which you do it determines the quality of your life. So you can't wait until you solve your problems to be happy. So the question of how to live a meaningful life is fairly simple to answer. In each moment, we have an opportunity to connect with the contents of consciousness, with the sights and sounds and sensations and ideas that constitute the actual character of our lives. Or we can be lost in thought, that is, thinking without knowing that we're thinking. Then we are fully at the mercy of whatever thoughts arise, and as you know, the character of so much of our thinking is unhappy. The mind becomes a kind of theater of doubt and anxiety and regret, and it's only in this theater that one can be concerned about what it all means and to get lost in the false questions of philosophy. This moment, simply this, does not, cannot, and need not mean anything or have any purpose. One can only think otherwise, and thinking otherwise seems to introduce a crisis of meaning. Mindfulness is the capacity to break the spell and to actually connect with the experience in the present moment, but it doesn't come naturally, as you probably have noticed. So that's why we practice it. Thank you for choosing to be here. This has been Coach Feeney with the Guided Meditation Series for 21 Boom, and I will be back here next week and hopefully, well, at least know that others will be watching this. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your week.